I'm Thomas Smith, and for the last week I've been experimenting with DALL-E, the new generative network from OpenAI. It's a pretty incredible system. You can type in a prompt of pretty much anything you want to see, and it will generate an image based on that. And its capabilities are just insane. So I think this is going to have a huge impact on the industry that I'm in, which is stock image licensing. And I want to demonstrate particularly why I think this is going to have an impact on illustration, because stock illustrations are valuable, certainly generate a lot of revenue, but it's something that DALL-E is incredibly good at doing. So let's enter into DALL-E, which I've got up here, a typical stock image. Let's put in a person's gloved hand holding a vial of medicine. And I'm going to say illustration, which is going to tell it to create an illustration. I'm going to say generate. And it takes about 10-15 seconds to generate an image, so I'll pause and come back when it's done. So here we go. This is what it's created, totally out of nowhere. These are images that you could easily turn into a vector and go ahead and license. You could even, as people usually do with these kinds of illustrations out in the world, you could take this and put whatever text you wanted over here, make it a green space that your end buyer could swap that out in Photoshop or Illustrator, make it say COVID-19 and getting a shot, or monkeypox shot, or whatever. So these kinds of stock illustrations, again, you can just generate effortlessly. And you can just keep doing this over and over again. You could probably create hundreds or thousands of these very rapidly. And again, you could customize them, or you could put them out on a stock marketplace, and your end user could customize that to have any particular kind of pretend medication or real medication, so COVID shot or whatever you want to put on that vial. So pretty incredible. Again, this is an area of stock illustration that's quite popular, but other popular concepts, business meetings. So I'm going to say here, I'm going to specifically say a licensable stock illustration of a business meeting. This is a prompt that my colleague Mark Milstein actually suggested, and let's go ahead and do this. All right, there's our results. So you can see we've got a bunch of different styles here, and this is definitely the kind of thing you could see as a illustration for this kind of topic, almost a clip art type of look to it. There's some that are more photorealistic. They kind of fail a bit around the faces, I think, but it's very successful with these ones that are more of a general concept. But of course, there's definitely a push towards different kinds of images, different kinds of ways to depict these types of topics. So let's try putting a licensable stock illustration of a business meeting at a women-owned company, because what it's generating here seems to be more, sort of mirrors the biases in its training data. So we're getting mostly men around these tables. So let's go ahead and tweak that a bit by adding in this extra bit to the prompt. Okay, so now we've got some images that are, again, these sort of illustrations tailored more to this specific type of prompt. Now these are, again, they're not perfect. There's some weirdness around the faces, but you could easily pull this into a program like Illustrator, vectorize it, and a human illustrator could clean this up in probably 10-20 seconds, just messing with these designs a little bit. We can also request some variations on a specific topic. So I can click here and get variations on an image where I feel like it's going in the right direction. And there you go, so some of the kinds of things that it's going to generate. And again, you could keep going down a process, you could keep tweaking the prompt to get closer. I think it's interesting that in adding the prompt, a women-owned business, it has kind of made this more diverse as well. We see people from different backgrounds, and I think that's it's interesting because it will take the context of that prompt and extrapolate it out and into things it knows about the world. So I think it's making the assumption that a women-owned business will also be more diverse, which is kind of a cool thing that's captured in probably, again, the training data there. So let's look at some other kinds of things you can do with this for stock illustration. Visual metaphors, something that's also very popular in the stock illustration world. So let's try to type in a gavel on a white background. We'll start with that. So court cases, it's hard to illustrate them, so often people go with an illustration that has a visual metaphor, like a gavel banging, that kind of concept captures the idea of a court case being decided. And here we are, lots of lovely wooden gavels that never existed. You can definitely see this with, some text about a specific case float over top of it. And you've got all these different variations of that very strong visual metaphor. Again, these are photorealistic. They're pretty good. Maybe you need a little cleanup, but it's even gotten the shadows right. It's gotten all these things right on the design. And you can even then tweak this and get different variations. I could say a gavel on a diffuse blue background. Switch these kinds of things up. And we got a bunch of diffuse blue backgrounds. So really you could come up with anything. Again, the lighting is almost going to mirror as if this background is actually reflecting onto the gavel, and we'll see that in these images. So pretty incredible capability, again, to generate those kinds of visual metaphors. Okay, so let's see how it does on another kind of illustration that's really popular and very commercially viable, and that's abstract background. So these are images that you can license and use for the background of an app or the background of a presentation. They're sort of subtle and abstract. So let's go ahead and type in, I'm going to say abstract, and I'm going to say screensaver background, because I think that's going to tell it what genre we're sort of looking for. We'll say semi-transparent, swirling blue colors. And let's see what it does with that. So indeed, we've got a bunch of those. This is probably too strong in terms of the swirls there to be, viable, but certainly something like this that almost has an organic feel to it. And then this one definitely. And again, we can press variations, and we can just continue to generate variations on that design as long as we want to, and make probably hundreds of these kinds of swirly blue visual backgrounds. And you could tweak that, you could change up the colors, and you could generate these kinds of abstract backgrounds, plenty of room for copy, as much as you wanted to. So here's a bunch of variations on that same nice swirly blue, and we could then click on these and create variations of our variation and just keep going endlessly. So obviously you can see there's a huge potential here in the stock media licensing space to disrupt all kinds of things, from more sort of abstract things like this to visual metaphors like the gavel that really looked almost photorealistic, to more sort of conceptual illustrations like the business meetings we were seeing earlier. And some of these would probably be licensable straight off the bat. Some of them might need a little bit of tweaking from a person, but fundamentally, you could use a system like this to create a huge amount of stock illustration very quickly and for almost no cost. So what's the downsides, or what's stopping this from happening right now? There's a couple of things that restrict this. The first is that DALL-E itself is actually, OpenAI has, I think, very intelligently said that you cannot use these for any kind of commercial purpose. You cannot sell the images that DALL-E creates. It's in a beta stage at the moment. They're just testing the software out. So that's the biggest restriction. You couldn't take one of these images and go and license it right now. However, there's other tools out there. These models, now that we know they can exist, others will build them. The business models around them will change. It's almost definite that you'll see something like this that can generate paid licensable images. And again, once that happens, you can see there's a big possibility of disruption here. The other thing that is a restriction is more of a technical one. These images are 1024 pixels square, so much bigger than some earlier generative images, but certainly not big enough for most licensing use cases. However, for some of those images that were more of an illustration, you could easily pull that into a program like Illustrator or vectorize it, and then make it as big as you want it, and trace out the vectors on that. And then once you did that, you could crop it into any format that you wanted, and you could blow it up to whatever size you needed it to be. The other thing you could do is use a technology like AI super resolution and take even one of those photorealistic images like the gavel or these backgrounds and increase the pixel count on those pretty dramatically using a technology like that. Again, getting them to be the size that would be needed for licensing. So certainly there's some technical restrictions, but I don't think any of those are really insurmountable, even with today's technologies. And certainly these kinds of generative networks like DALL-E are going to get better. They're going to get better at generating bigger images over time as well. And the third thing is just the lack of clarity about copyright for these kinds of assets. So there's a lot of decisions that are in the works right now. I'm not an attorney, so I don't really know all of the details on those. But my understanding at the moment is that things that are created by an AI system like this are not necessarily copyrightable. And again, that might change, the rules around that might change, but that might prevent you from not necessarily licensing these, but protecting any licenses you did grant on them. So that's certainly something that will evolve over time as well. However, despite all that, I think all those restrictions will probably be resolved and fall away over time. And these technologies are going to be incredibly disruptive within the industry. You can see how easily this could replace some of the functions of a human illustrator, or allow one person or a small company to generate hundreds or thousands of licensable stock images basically overnight on any topic, to respond to trends that are happening in the world, and to really take a big chunk of that market if they wanted to. So shout out here I'll give to Digital Media Licensing Association, an organization that I'm part of. I'm leading a committee that's putting together our 2022 International Digital Media Licensing Conference. We're going to talk a bunch about synthetic content, about generative networks, the legal aspects. We're going to really delve into that. That's in October. Check out digitalmedialicensing.org to see more about that group. Great group. And again, I'm really excited to hear from a lot of experts about what this is going to mean for the industry, and again, some of those deeper legal questions and that kind of thing too. So check out digitalmedialicensing.org, and we do have early bird tickets available for that conference, so go ahead and grab one of those. Also follow me here. I'm going to be doing a lot more demos of DALL-E and some of the impacts I think it's going to have on a lot of different industries.